The stars had gone quiet. Too quiet for a sector like Velkar's Edge, where traders buzzed like flies and pirate signals flickered like dying stars. Patrols usually picked up background chatter, supply requests, navigation updates, smugglers lying through their teeth. But now, dead silence. Admiral Tharek stood on the command deck of the Varelion, the Empire's Pride-class dreadnought, surrounded by his officers. His 4 eyes scanned the hologrid again, though he'd already done so twice. Nothing moved. Nothing dared. Until it appeared. A small, slow-moving blip, entering the edge of the system. No call sign, no signal beacon. It wasn't cloaked, it just wasn't trying to hide. It moved like it belonged here, like it didn't care who saw it. That's what made Tharek's stomach churn. "Enhance visual," he ordered. The projection flickered. Then locked in. The shape was unmistakable, crude, asymmetrical, bulky as hell, not the sleek insectoid curves of Imperial craft, not the glittering glass of trader circles. This was something else. No, it was human. No sigils, no colors, just that brutal gray plating, and a name carved into its side, scorched black like someone had branded it with pain itself. Tharek took a half-step back. "That's not possible," one of the bridge techs whispered. "They were wiped out." Someone else muttered. "The Terran Accord collapsed. No ships made it out. They said Earth was—" "I know what they said," Tharek snapped. But his voice cracked on the last word. He'd been a young commander during the Purge. He remembered the way humans fought, irrational, unrelenting, suicidal. They weren't warriors. They were storms wrapped in flesh. And now, one of them was here. The bridge dimmed slightly. Even the automated systems hesitated. The computer tagged the ship with a flashing red label, ID unknown, design, Earth origin, status, active, pilot unknown, warning, classified entity detected. "What are your orders, sir?" the helmsman asked. The young officer's hands were trembling, his claws tapping against the console. Tharek didn't answer right away, because deep down, he knew. This wasn't just any human ship. It wasn't a remnant. It wasn't lost. This one had come back, and it had chosen to come here, Velkar's Edge, on purpose. "Stand by," Tharek said finally. "Do not engage, not unless fired upon." "But sir, it's alone." "And so were a dozen Imperial fleets before they were wiped out by one of those things," Tharek snapped. "You think numbers matter to them? They don't care how many of us there are. They'll burn everything just to make a point." The bridge fell silent. The ship on the screen kept coming, slow and deliberate. It moved like a hunter, not in a rush, but knowing exactly where it was going. And why. In the silence, Tharek's comms officer spoke. "We're receiving a transmission." Everyone turned. "What language?" "Human, Terran Standard. But it's short, just one line." "Play it." The speakers cracked, and then, in a low, gravel-worn voice that sounded like rust and war, a single sentence echoed across the bridge. "I only need one shot." The message ended. No static, no threat, no demand, just that. Tharek's breath caught in his throat, because he knew what it meant. They all did. It wasn't a bluff. That ship was here for a reason, and somewhere inside it was a human. Not just any human, one who'd survived what no one should have, one who'd buried the past and come back to dig up the bones of an empire that thought it had won. And he wasn't here to talk. He was here to finish something. There was no panic on the bridge, just silence. Deep, sinking, and heavy. The kind that drags you under like cold water when you realize you can't swim anymore. The human ship didn't accelerate, didn't alter course. It just kept coming, like death in motion, slow, steady, and absolutely certain. Tharek's mind raced. He was no stranger to battle. He'd led campaigns against the Vari revolts. He'd commanded through the border wars. But none of that mattered now. That thing out there wasn't another empire testing their limits. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't politics. It was personal. He turned to the tactical officer. "Scan for weapons." "I already did," she said, not meeting his eyes. "There's something wrong." "What do you mean, wrong?" She hesitated, then brought up the readout on the holoscreen. "The core signature doesn't match anything in our database. It's not fission, not fusion. It's not antimatter. It's—" She stopped again. "Out with it." "It's alive." Tharek's gut turned to ice. "What did you just say?" "The ship. It's giving off organoreactive feedback, bioelectric pulses like a living brain. It's not metal and fuel anymore. It's part of something. Maybe someone." Tharek didn't respond. He didn't have words for this. He remembered the old war logs, the desperate audio files from the final days of Earth. Some of them mentioned projects, insane ones, cyber-organic fusions, experimental core consciousness. They said humans were trying to escape the limits of war by becoming the weapon. He always thought those were stories, myths, trauma-induced hallucinations from broken soldiers. Now he wasn't so sure. "Sir," came the voice from navigation, quiet but clear. "If it stays on this course, it'll pass within 75 clicks of our perimeter fleet. Do not intercept, do not challenge. If it broadcasts again, play it immediately." His second-in-command leaned closer. "You're really just going to let it pass through?" "No," Tharek said, his voice colder than vacuum. "I'm going to let it show us what it wants. That way maybe someone lives long enough to tell the story." Inside the human ship, the wreck, the air was thick with recycled breath and quiet vengeance. The pilot sat alone in the command chair, one hand wrapped in worn leather and scar tissue resting on the armrest. He hadn't spoken since the broadcast. He didn't need to. The ship pulsed around him like a beast in hibernation. It responded to his thoughts, his memories, his rage. It knew what he wanted, and it remembered why. He leaned forward, staring through the cracked glass canopy. Imperial ships shimmered in the distance like insects, fragile and glittering in their false confidence. He could smell their fear. Even through the void, he could feel it. They didn't recognize him, not yet. But they would. They always did, right before they died. His fingers tightened. Old calluses scraped against the chair controls. He felt the itch behind his right eye, the artificial nerve connection twitching. It always flared up before he killed someone. "That's how I know I'm still human," he thought bitterly. He closed his eyes, and the memories came. The sound of his daughter's laughter in the old courtyard back on Earth, the smell of rain, the crunch of boots on soil during their last walk to the shelter. She was holding his hand, asking him if the war would reach their city. "It won't," he'd told her. "I won't let it." He'd lied. The Empire didn't bother with occupation or surrender notices. They dropped orbital fire like holy judgment and left no survivors. He survived only because the government had buried him in a black site lab beneath the mountain, testing a ship that wasn't ready and a pilot no longer fit for duty. He woke up 6 months later to silence. No Earth, no daughter, no forgiveness, only rage, and a ship that breathed when he did. Back on the Virelian, Tharek stood alone in the strategy chamber. He'd dismissed the crew. Some of them were too young. Others too afraid. None of them knew what this really meant. He turned on the private relay line and punched in an encrypted code known only to command-level staff with clearance Omega Black. It connected after 3 long seconds. A distorted voice answered. "You saw it?" "Yes." Are you certain it's him? Tharek swallowed. The ship matches no registry. The pulse signature is bio-integrated. The transmission was short. 5 words. What were they? I only need 1 shot. Silence. Then, it's him. Tharek's hands curled into fists. Why is he alive? Because we failed. We purged Earth. We erased every installation, every base. We tracked every human ship. Not that one. Tharek's eyes narrowed. Tell me. There was a long sigh from the other end. He was part of Project Endlight, a last-ditch Terran experiment in mind-weapon synchronization. He wasn't supposed to make it out of the lab. When Earth fell, he went dark. We assumed he died. We assumed wrong. And now, he's not just a human anymore. He is that ship, the pilot, the core, the weapon, all one. What does he want? Another pause. Then, the voice said with grim finality, he wants us to remember. The wreck slowed as it neared the orbital ring around Velkar's edge. No comms, no resistance. The pilot exhaled. The ship inhaled. Then he spoke, softly, but the ship heard. Open visual channel. The ship obeyed, patching into the local frequencies, hijacking Imperial command lines. Tharek's face appeared on screen. You're not welcome here, the Admiral said. Neither were you on Earth. You don't have to do this. I already did. Tharek flinched. Then why come back? Because your empire still breathes. Tharek took a breath. You could have gone anywhere. You could have lived quietly. You had time. You disappeared for years. I had to rebuild. Rebuild what? The pilot stared directly into the screen, eyes like chipped stone. Pain. The moment the signal cut, the wreck's undercarriage shifted, not with the clunk of machinery, but with the stretch and groan of muscle and bone. The hull grew, forming jagged fins and glowing veins of red-hot energy. Its weapon systems weren't mounted. They grew like thorns from the sides of a beast that had been sleeping for too long. Inside the Imperial fleet, alarms screamed. Tharek watched in frozen horror as one of their assault frigates, the Karnax, drifted slightly closer, miscalculating the wreck's path by only a kilometer. It was too close. The pilot didn't fire a missile. He didn't lock on with targeting. He simply thought, and the ship responded. A spear of molten light tore from the bow, shaped like a blade of fire. It pierced the Karnax from stern to spine, slicing the ship in half without a sound. There was no explosion, no chaos, just silence and 2 drifting halves of a once mighty ship, dismembered in an instant. Then came the second message, broadcast wide. That was your warning shot. Back on the Varelian, Tharek knew what came next. He opened the emergency command line and began a full system evac of Velkar's edge. This isn't a war, he muttered to no one. It's a reckoning. His second-in-command stepped forward. Should we mobilize planetary defenses? No, Tharek said, shaking his head. They won't matter. Then what should we do? He stared at the screen, where the human ship now hovered like a blade over the planet. Pray that he only wants 1 shot. Inside the wreck, the pilot took a final look at the coordinates. The Empire had buried the facility under ice and metal, masking its existence behind mining operations and atmospheric plants. But he'd found it. The last place they experimented on Terran children, turning survivors into control units, trying to mimic what he had become naturally. They'd failed, but the screams were still in the walls. The wreck charged. No propulsion, just will. The planetary shield lit up as defense cannons fired. The pilot didn't flinch. The wreck absorbed the blasts like rain on steel. Then, with a sudden snap of sound and light, the ship descended. It didn't attack cities. It didn't level infrastructure. It aimed directly for the facility. One shot. The earth cracked. Fire erupted. The hidden base that didn't exist to the public eye was torn from the crust like a rotting tooth. Inside, screams rose. But they were different this time. Not the screams of children, but the architects of pain. Above, Tharek watched it burn. His hands shook. He didn't mourn them. He feared what would come next. Because if this was mercy, he didn't want to see what vengeance looked like. The sky above Velkar's edge was still smoldering. Even from orbit, the wound was visible. A jagged, blackened scar in the planet's crust where the secret Imperial facility used to be. No one mourned its destruction, not publicly. The Empire would never admit it existed. But everyone on the command deck of the Varelian knew exactly what it was, what it did, and who it buried. Tharek stood alone at the viewport, watching smoke bleed into the upper atmosphere. No words, no officers hovering. They all kept their distance now. He looked tired. Not from age. Tharek was still in his prime, but from knowing that history had caught up with him, and it came wearing a human face. The wreck hadn't moved since it fired. It now hovered quietly, like a predator that had just eaten. Its glow pulsed slow and steady, still alive, still watching. "Sir," his comms officer finally spoke, voice cautious. "Imperial High Command is demanding a response." "Let them wait," Tharek muttered. "But, sir..." He turned slowly. His face was blank, but his eyes were darker now, like something old inside him had snapped. "If you forward another message to me before I ask for it, I'll have your claws removed and stuffed into your ears. Understood?" The officer swallowed hard. Yes, Admiral." Tharek turned back to the viewport. This wasn't over. He knew men like that human. He understood the kind of soul it took to fly a ship made from pain. He hadn't come for just a message. This was a warning shot. The next one would be the end. Inside the wreck, the pilot sat motionless, eyes closed, shoulders tense. His breathing was shallow, not from exhaustion, but restraint. The ship hummed around him, mirroring his pulse. It could feel his hunger for more. It wanted to finish the job, but he held it back. He had only one rule left. No innocent blood. He'd crossed every other line. But not that one. Not yet. He opened his eyes and stared down at the burning ruin of the facility. They thought they could bury it, hide the truth beneath ice and slag, as if time would erase what they did. He remembered the children, not just his own daughter, though she was the wound that never healed, but the others. The ones he found in the old databanks when he scavenged the Empire's archives. Project Warden, Project Divide, Project Pulse. They'd taken survivors of the Terran Purge, orphans, scavengers, captured soldiers, and used them. Hooked them into machines, fed them chemicals, plugged their bodies into artificial minds to try and recreate what he had become naturally. None of them survived. They never stood a chance. Except one. Her name was Anna. She wasn't his blood. She wasn't even from his city. But the day he found her file, buried in the wreckage of an old intelligence node, he knew her name like it had always been carved into his bones. She was 10 when the Empire took her. They tested her for synchronization. She scored high, too high. They moved her to Velkar's edge. She vanished after that. But now, he knew. That base, that facility, that graveyard, it had been hers. He never got to meet her, but he just avenged her. That would have to be enough. The wreck whispered to him in pulses and code. It asked if they could leave now, if they could burn something else. The ship didn't understand closure. It only knew blood, but he silenced it. "No," he muttered. "Not yet." He opened the comms channel again, direct line to the Verelium. One way, uncompromised. The Empire could trace it, but they wouldn't be able to intercept it. He made sure of that. A moment later, Tharek's face appeared again, lined, hardened, eyes hollow. "You got what you wanted," the Admiral said flatly. "No," the pilot replied, voice low and scarred. "That was justice." Tharek stared at him. "How many more?" "Just one." "Then do it. Take your shot. End me now." The pilot didn't respond. Instead, he said, "You remember Project Echo?" Tharek flinched, just slightly, but enough. "Don't pretend you weren't involved," the pilot continued. "I've seen the logs. You signed off on it, oversaw the budget, approved the facility plans. I was a different man then. You were the same, just less afraid." Tharek's jaw tightened. "So what now? You're going to hunt every name on the list? There are hundreds." "Wrong," the pilot said. "There are 6. 6 what?" "6 people who made decisions. 6 names with red ink all over their hands. You're one of them. And the rest? I'll find them." Tharek stepped forward, voice low. "Then what? You burn the Empire down one man at a time? You really think that changes anything?" The pilot leaned closer to the screen. "I'm not here to change anything," he said. "I'm here to make sure no one forgets." Then he cut the feed. On the edge of the bridge, Tharek stood completely still. He'd seen that face before. Not the scars, not the years, but that look. That cold, relentless resolve. It haunted him, because he remembered the way that look stared at him across a shattered hallway 20 years ago, buried under rubble, half dead, holding a gun made from melted scrap and sheer hate. He didn't know it then, but he'd left the wrong man alive. Across the stars, in a forgotten vault deep beneath the Empire's old diplomatic sector, a man named Varen Drell stirred in his sleep. His personal security system lit up. Unauthorized access, encrypted message, priority flag, ghost protocol. He blinked, sat up slowly, pulled the data chip from under his bed, and jammed it into the side console. He hadn't used that port in years. The screen blinked. One line of text appeared. 5 left. Varen's blood ran cold. He stood quickly, yanked open his closet, and pulled out a black briefcase that hadn't seen daylight since the purge. He entered a 6-digit code, then a retina scan. Inside was a small metallic badge, old and worn, the seal of the Inner Imperial Council. 1 of 6. The message wasn't a threat. It was a countdown. The wreck turned silently and began to move. No propulsion burn, no shift in weight, just gravity bending around it like it knew the stars better than they knew themselves. The pilot leaned back in the chair, jaw clenched. He didn't feel satisfaction. Not even peace. Just clarity. This wasn't vengeance, it was memory, turned into a weapon. He would not stop. Not until the last one looked him in the eye and understood. Understood why he came back. Back on Velkar's edge, Tharek finally sat down. Not in command, not in control. Just a man. He looked down at his hands and saw blood, not literal, but memory-colored. 20 years ago, they told him it was the right thing, that humanity was unstable, dangerous, unpredictable. They were right, but they never asked why. They just wanted to burn the problem away. Now the fire had come home, and it remembered every single name. The galaxy had a way of forgetting, not out of mercy, out of convenience. Empires didn't write history to remember pain. They wrote it to control pain, to bury it beneath doctrine and legacy and medals. They didn't teach about the children in cages, the cities turned to ash, or the silence that came after Earth went dark. But he remembered. The pilot of the wreck didn't sleep. Not really. The ship didn't allow it. Even in low-energy mode, the neural threads kept his thoughts sharp, alive, electric. He drifted in and out of old memories, some real, some reconstructed through pain. Her voice haunted him again tonight. "Daddy, why is the sky glowing?" He hadn't answered. He remembered holding her tighter, shielding her from the light as the horizon burned white. The last thing he saw before the shelter's doors slammed shut was her eyes wide with confusion, not fear. He never saw her again. Not after the collapse, not after the firestorms, not after the Empire dropped phase charges on every surviving outpost. The war wasn't won, it was erased. But he had survived. And now, he was the war. His next target wasn't hidden. It was orbiting an uninhabited moon in the Hadrax belt, a private satellite station listed as a corporate research hub. The Empire didn't even bother disguising it properly. But he knew better. He'd found the documents buried in a deleted sector of an abandoned intel relay, a conversation thread from 22 years ago. The man who signed the construction permit had used an alias back then. But aliases don't hold up forever. He cross-checked the retinal scan logs from a leftover prisoner manifest. Name: Commander Arden Luther. Location: Research Station. K-21. Status: retired, civilian, protected. Luther wasn't a soldier anymore, but he had ordered 5 planetary cleanses during the purge. One of them was New Soul. That was where Anna had been taken. He remembered that name. And now, so would Luther. The wreck dropped out of warp like a scream into silence. No ripple, no flare. 1 second, empty stars. The next, death incarnate. K-21 was a sleek, silver construct, shaped like a teardrop caught in orbit. Expensive, isolated, untouched by war, the perfect hiding place for cowards. Inside the station, the alert blared across the lounge. Luther was already halfway to the panic chamber when the security AI stopped him. External threat detected. Ship ID unrecognized. Behavior pattern matches category black entity. His breath caught. Black? As in human class anomaly. Code: wreck. Luther stopped running. Because he knew that name. Not officially, not on paper, but in whispers, in shadows. Among the last surviving Imperial officers, that name had become a ghost story. Something to scare old men who'd made bad decisions. "He'll come back one day," they said. "And when he does, he won't knock." Luther turned and ran the other way. The panic chamber wouldn't save him. Nothing would. Inside the wreck, the pilot stood for the first time in days. The ship had adjusted itself to his posture. The controls slid into place. The armor plating around his chest sealed tight with a hiss. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was the suit. He synced to the boarding lance, a long, spear-shaped extension of the ship's hull that could pierce bulkheads and inject him into any structure like a virus. It was crude, brutal, like him. The ship didn't ask if he was sure. It knew. K-21's external shields were strong, standard Imperial tech, good for meteor defense and small arms fire, but they weren't made for this. The lance hit like a god's finger. It punctured the upper docking port, bored straight through reinforced alloy, and locked in place. Pressurized gas hissed out as atmosphere fled. The ship injected its boarding tendrils into the hallway, carbon titanium roots that fused with the station walls. The pilot stepped into silence. His boots were soundless on the metal floor. The corridor lights flickered, reacting to his presence. Cameras turned to track him, then exploded one by one as the ship's virus corrupted the system. Somewhere ahead, the security bots activated. Good. He needed a warm-up. Luther watched it all from the mainframe chamber. He could barely breathe. Sweat soaked his collar. 3 armed bots stood between him and the corridor. His fingers trembled on the override switch. "Disable all power to Corridor 6, he barked. The AI didn't respond. "Do it now." "I can't. He's inside the system." "Then shut it all down." "You are no longer in command." The lights went red. The door hissed open, and then he saw him. The pilot didn't raise a weapon. He didn't need to. The first 2 security bots opened fire, unleashing plasma bursts meant to vaporize organics. But he moved through it like a storm, his armor absorbing the heat, converting it into kinetic force. He slammed one bot into the wall so hard its limbs shattered. The second one he crushed under his boot. The third tried to run. He let it, then turned to Luther. "You remember New Soul?" the pilot asked, voice like a growl wrapped in static. Luther backed up against the console. "I was following orders. We all were." The pilot took a step forward. "You dropped phase charges into refugee tunnels." "I didn't know there were children down there." "You knew." "You just didn't care." "I was trying to win a war." The pilot stopped inches from him. "No, you were trying to end a species." Luther collapsed to his knees. "Please, I have a family now. Grandchildren. This isn't justice anymore. This is murder." The pilot knelt beside him and whispered, "So was Earth." Then he stood, and the wreck pulsed through the corridor again. The room dissolved in white light. From orbit, K-21 bloomed like a red flower. Silent, instant. The wreck rose back into the void. No transmission, no gloating, no declaration, just departure. Across the Empire, the message spread faster than any official warning. K-21, gone. Luther, dead. Wreck, alive. Fear spread like infection. Old men with old secrets began vanishing from public view. Retired commanders were recalled. Protected identities were scrubbed. New security protocols were activated. None of it mattered. The wreck didn't care about walls or codes. It only cared about names. And 4 of them were still alive. On a cold mining moon in the Dronax cluster, one of them, Jarn Sulik, watched the broadcast with shaking hands. He had left the military decades ago. Thought he had escaped. He hadn't. Not from this. He dropped the drink from his hand, stood slowly, and opened the hidden drawer beneath his bed. Inside was an old medallion, Imperial Elite, covered in dust, and beside it, a data chip with one word etched on it. Wreck. He had saved it, thinking maybe one day someone would need to know the truth. Now it was too late. The truth was already coming. Inside the wreck, the pilot sat again. No emotion. No joy. No peace. Just one less name. And the next set of coordinates glowing on the screen. He whispered them aloud, and the ship roared silently back into the stars. The wreck hummed in a way it hadn't in years. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't purpose. It was alignment. With every death, the ship grew quieter. Not weaker. Quieter. As if it was sinking more deeply with the man inside it, drawing power not from energy but from closure. It pulsed less often now, didn't twitch against the controls, didn't demand movement. It understood. They weren't hunting a target. They were burying ghosts, one at a time. The third name was Jarn Sulik, ex-military analyst, logistics specialist. The kind of man who never fired a shot, but ensured millions of them landed where they needed to, on cities, bunkers, evacuation shuttles. He didn't wear a uniform anymore. He'd grown out his hair, grown a beard, taken up residence in the Dronax cluster's mining moons under a new identity. Ran cargo, traded ore. But ghosts don't care about names. They follow blood, and Jarns was all over the Earth's last days. The wreck didn't arrive in system with flare. It glided in beneath the asteroid field, hugging radiation shadows, bending light until even the local orbital scanners missed it. But Yarn didn't need a scanner to feel it. He was asleep when the silence changed. In his cheap HAB unit on the mining colony's outer ring, Yarn woke drenched in sweat. The power had flickered. The artificial air felt heavier. He went to the small console embedded in the wall, tapped a few commands, brought up the colony's satellite feed. Empty. Then he zoomed in. And he saw it, the shape, the absence of stars, the cold shadow in the void. He collapsed into the chair. "No," he whispered. "Not me, not me." But it was. Inside the wreck, the pilot said nothing. He didn't need to prepare. There was no plan, no infiltration, no intel. This wasn't war. It was a man coming to ask another man why. Not because he needed answers, but because they did. The ones who couldn't ask anymore. On Dronax, Yarn was already in motion. He had a bag packed in less than 2 minutes. Emergency cache, breather mask, old sidearm, still oiled, still deadly. His hands trembled as he punched in the exit code for the back tunnel. This colony was barely secured. No defense grid, no security force. They didn't need it, because no one attacked mining moons. No one except ghosts. The airlock hissed as it opened. Cold wind hit his face. Outside, dust storms blew across the frozen plain. He stepped out, boots crunching against frost, breathing heavy into the mask. He saw the ship then. It had landed without a sound. No flames, no light, no need for drama. It just appeared, like death always does. The pilot stepped down from the wreck, not wearing a helmet. His breath fogged in the air. His coat was old military issue, Terran Special Recon, blackened and patched with time. The symbol was still there, a sun cracked in half. Yarn pointed the pistol, arms shaking. "You don't have to do this." "Yes," the pilot said, voice low, "I do. I was just logistics. I didn't kill anyone." "You routed the purge orders to Sector 9. You diverted resources away from the refugee arcs. You redirected fuel from the supply ships to the orbital batteries." "I didn't know." The pilot cut him off. "You knew. You just didn't care who bled so long as it wasn't you." Yarn's lip trembled. He looked like he wanted to beg, but the words caught in his throat. Because deep down, he knew this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the reaping. The pilot stepped closer. Yarn fired. The shot went wide. Panic made sure of it. The pilot didn't raise a weapon. He closed the distance, grabbed Yarn by the wrist, twisted until bone cracked, and wrenched the gun from his hand. Then he shoved the man back into the snow, kneeling on his chest. "Her name was Anna," the pilot said, calm but cold. "She was 10. She died in a supply pod that never launched because your manifest said fuel wasn't a priority." "I didn't know!" Yarn screamed. "I didn't know! I didn't read every line." "That's the problem," the pilot growled. "You didn't read the names. You just clicked approve." Yarn wept. It was ugly, sniveling, full of mucus and self-pity. He looked up with wide, desperate eyes. "Please, I have nothing left. I live in dirt. I eat cold meals. I see their faces every night. Isn't that enough?" The pilot leaned closer. "No." Then he pressed the cold metal of the pistol into Yarn's hand. "Do it yourself." Yarn froze. "What?" The pilot stood. "You signed their deaths with a pen. Sign your own with a bullet." He turned his back and walked away. 5 steps. 6. He heard the sobbing stop. He heard the click. He didn't flinch when the shot echoed. Back in orbit, the wreck opened its hatch without command. It felt the job was done. Not clean, not satisfying, but done. The pilot stepped back inside. He didn't look proud. He looked tired. As the door sealed, he whispered, "3 left." Word spread faster now. This wasn't just vengeance, it was method. Each of the 6 who orchestrated the Terran purge, directly or from the shadows, were being hunted. Not with armies, not with threats, but with truth. And that scared them more, because there were files, logs, messages once thought deleted now rising from dead servers. The wreck had cracked black-level encryption like it was chalk. Every time the pilot struck, he left behind names, dates, orders, not for the Empire, for the people. And now even loyal citizens began to whisper. What if they deserved it? What if Earth wasn't the monster? In the heart of the Empire's central system, a planet city so vast its surface had long vanished beneath metal, the Council convened. They were 5 now. They used to be 6, the last surviving architects of the Purge. They had ruled quietly, behind names, behind corporations, behind layers of bureaucracy. But the wreck didn't care about masks. It stripped them all away. Now even their own security forces didn't fully trust them. One of them, an aging woman named Dreska, slammed her fist on the table. He's dismantling us like we're nothing. He doesn't need an army. He is the war. Another councilman, white-haired, gaunt, with glass implants in his eyes, leaned back. Perhaps it is time we face him. Dreska blinked. Are you mad? No. Just tired. You want to negotiate with a human weapon? No, I want to see if we remember what we did. The room went quiet, because none of them wanted to answer that question. Inside the wreck, the pilot sat still as a tomb. The ship showed him the next target. Name, Dreska Vel Orin location, Imperial Core, status Council tier, untouchable. The wreck blinked once. It didn't ask if it should proceed, but the pilot placed a hand on the hull. Not yet. He stared at the coordinates. That strike would be different. It wouldn't be surgical. It would be loud, and it would bring down everything with it. But first, he needed the truth. Not just from them, but from himself. Space stretched ahead like an old scar. The wreck drifted, silent and dark. Hidden inside the shadow of a derelict trade route near the dead star Obrix 4. The Empire had long since abandoned this system, claiming its gravitational collapse had made navigation impossible. But the pilot knew better. Sometimes, the Empire left things behind because they couldn't bear to look at them anymore. He sat in stillness, eyes shut, mind connected to the ship by threads of thought and memory. He wasn't flying. He wasn't planning. He was remembering. The next name on his list, Dreska Vel Orin, was the hardest. Not because she was more powerful, not because she had more blood on her hands, but because once she tried to save him. He hadn't always been this man. Before the purge, before the screams, before Earth turned to ash, he was a soldier named Callan. No medals, no command, just a field operative, good at vanishing, better at killing. He didn't care about politics. He didn't understand what strategic containment really meant. He followed orders because he believed they came from people who gave a damn. Dreska was one of those people. Back then, she wasn't a council member. She was a field coordinator, stationed at a joint Earth-Empire diplomacy unit on Titan's orbit. She was younger, fierce, and naively idealistic. She believed in peace. And Callan, still a bruised, half-functional man trying to hold his family together, believed maybe the Empire wasn't as cruel as the underground said. She helped get Anna into a protected enclave once the first orbital blasts began, gave them coordinates to an emergency evac shelter, falsified records to keep Anna's name off the relocation list. He remembered her eyes. Cold blue, with a warmth behind them that didn't match the uniform she wore. He remembered thanking her, and she'd said, "Just survive. That'll be thanks enough." He did. She didn't. Not the woman she was, anyway. By the time Earth was burning, Dreska had vanished from the diplomatic rosters. When the dust cleared, she emerged on the Empire's council with a sanitized name and a new face, one that smiled while endorsing the Purge as a necessary strategic action. Callan watched that speech from the wreckage of a scavenged comm tower with a half-dead medic's corpse at his feet. He felt nothing. Not rage, not betrayal, just emptiness. Now, years later, the wreck hummed beneath him as her name blinked on the targeting display. He opened his eyes and whispered, "One visit before the war." The Imperial core was a fortress in every sense, not just physically, though it was ringed with planetary cannons, anti-ship mines, and a satellite shield grid that could atomize a fleet, but ideologically. It wasn't a place, it was a myth of power. The very idea of attacking it was considered suicide. Callan didn't care. He wasn't here to attack it. He was here to walk through its walls. Krenvox Prime, the city world at the core's heart, was a towering maze of metal, glass, and propaganda. Holoscreens danced with images of peace, prosperity, and strength. None showed the burning cities. None mentioned Earth. None remembered Anna. Dreska's private residence was buried within the upper spire of Sector 0-1, a diplomatic structure with enough shielding to withstand a meteor. That didn't matter. The wreck didn't land this time. It simply appeared, masked by a cloaking field stitched from stolen Imperial tech and warp distortion. Callan exited alone. No armor, no weapons, just a coat, boots, and a data drive with every decision she'd ever signed during the Purge. He entered through the service corridor. The guards didn't even see him. He moved like breath through broken glass, silent, sharp, and gone before they could recognize what they'd seen. Dreska's private quarters were dimly lit, full of antique artifacts meant to humanize a woman who hadn't seen a battlefield in 30 years. She stood by the window, wine glass in hand, as if she'd been expecting him. "I thought you might come," she said. He didn't speak. "You've already killed 3. Luther, Sulik, and the one who did himself. I assume I'm next." He took 2 steps forward. "You were supposed to protect us," Callan said. "I tried," she whispered. "But you know how this works. You think you can stop the machine from inside it, and by the time you realize you can't, you're a part of it. That's not an excuse." "No," she said, "it's not." They stood in silence. Then she turned, slowly. "Is that all that's left in you now? Vengeance?" "It's all that kept me alive." Dreska studied him. "You were a good man, Callan. A father, a husband, a soldier who followed orders even when they broke you." He clenched his jaw. "And look where it got me. Alive." He stepped closer, pulling the data chip from his coat. "You signed off on the sterilization of ARC-17. You knew it housed evacuees from the Europa Zone. You signed off on Anna's death." Her eyes didn't flinch. "I remember." His hands shook. He held the drive tight. His heartbeat roared in his ears. He could see Anna in the reflection of the window, smiling, running, alive. "You want me to beg?" Dreska asked. "I won't. I begged back then. No one listened. The Council wanted the Earth erased. I delayed it 6 months. That was all I could buy you." "You're lying." "I wish I was." He stood there, motionless. The wreck's neural tether tingled in his spine, urging him to act, to kill, to finish it. Instead, he said, "Why didn't you run?" "Because I knew this day would come." She took a slow sip of her wine. "I don't want mercy, Callan. I want it to end." He stared at her. Then, for the first time in decades, something inside him cracked. "I don't know what I want anymore." Callan left without killing her. No guards followed. No alarms rang. She let him go. He returned to the wreck in silence. And the ship hated it. It didn't understand inaction. It surged with bloodlust, systems ready to erase the city. The engines thrummed, waiting for his order to fire. But Callan sat still, hands on his knees. "She gets to live," he said aloud. The ship rejected the command. "She gets to live," he repeated louder. The ship shuddered. Lights flickered. The hull groaned. And then, for the first time, it obeyed. Dreska sat by her window long after he'd gone. When the transmission arrived, a single ping from her personal channel, she opened it with trembling fingers. It was a copy of the data drive. All her decisions, all her failures, all the names. Attached was a single message. "Tell the galaxy what you did, or I come back." She closed the message, then picked up her comm and scheduled a press broadcast. Back aboard the wreck, Callan sat alone in the dark. His thoughts didn't race, they didn't burn, they just existed. 3 names remained, but tonight, for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a weapon. He felt like a man, and that terrified him more than anything else. The wreck was restless. It didn't sleep. It didn't breathe. But it felt. Deep beneath the plating, beneath the fusion of metal and nerve. Ever since Callan let Dreska live, the ship had begun to change. Subtle at first, flickers in the lights, navigation hesitations, delayed neural feedback. Now it pulsed in waves like it was angry, or worse, confused. The bond between them, once seamless, now frayed around the edges. The ship didn't understand mercy. It didn't understand choice. It was built, bred to execute, to finish, to end, and Callan's hesitation at the core had infected it. It wanted blood, but he had started to want something else. He didn't know what. The wreck drifted in deep space now, far beyond mapped trade lanes, floating in the Osari void, a stretch of vacuum so cold and empty that even star charts left it blank. This is where he'd come to think. If he still could think. He sat in the command cradle, neural threads pulsing softly at the base of his skull. The ship fed him data automatically. Fleet movements, system scans, encrypted intercepts. The last name he'd confirmed was hiding somewhere in the Drell Core fringe, under the protection of a private militia that owed the Empire favors from long ago. Name: Counselor Breck Halvin, known for funding the black site that developed chemical weapons used in the last stage of the Purge. Status: in hiding. Location obscured by military-grade scrambling tech. Callan had every tool needed to find him. But he didn't move. Instead, he stared into the void. The silence here was different, not strategic, not tactical. It was honest. No stars, no noise, no systems begging for liberation. No one watching him, just the man he was, and the monster he might be. The wreck whispered again, subtle pulses running along his spine, tugging at old parts of his brain. Execute, cleanse, complete the cycle. That last one? Cycle. It hit harder than he wanted to admit. He'd never told the ship to kill. He'd wanted it to. He'd needed it to. But he was starting to wonder, was it still listening to his orders, or just feeding off his grief? The wreck gave him a gift then, Without prompting, a decrypted archive recently intercepted from Imperial subnet. Location pinged, Drellcore Fringe. Signature match, Halvan's DNA sequence, tagged in medical registry. Callan stared at the flashing dot on the star map. The last piece of this part of the puzzle. He should have felt satisfied. He didn't. Instead, he whispered, "Why now?" The ship didn't answer in words. It never did. But the lights dimmed, and the path forward blinked on screen, like a road paved in memory. It took 3 days to reach Drellcore. He didn't rush. The wreck could warp faster than almost any known ship, but Callan throttled the pace, needing time to let the weight settle. He spent most of the journey sifting through old mission logs, stuff he hadn't looked at in years. Battle footage, civilian casualty reports, unsent messages from soldiers who died waiting for orders that never came. One stuck with him. A transmission from a medic stationed in Outpost 39 during the last days of the purge. "We've got kids down here. I don't know how many. They're coughing blood. Whatever gas they dropped, it's still in the vents. Command's not answering. I'm sealing the doors. If anyone gets this, please tell Earth we tried. Please tell my wife." The message ended. The timestamp matched the day Halvan signed off on the VX-7 test run. Chemical warfare. Against refugees. And now that same man was hiding on a moon, probably guarded by mercenaries, living out his final years in luxury and silence. That was the thing that still pissed Callan off the most. The silence. The Empire hadn't just destroyed Earth. They tried to erase it, like it was a stain, and now he was the smear they couldn't wash away. When the wreck dropped out of warp, Drellcore loomed ahead, a gas giant surrounded by moons like broken teeth, each one scarred by mining operations, illegal storage vaults, and exile shelters. Halvan was on Moon 12. No civilian name, just coordinates, buried beneath rock in a private military complex with shield walls 6 layers thick. It wasn't a fortress. It was a bunker built to survive guilt. Callan didn't use the lance this time. No surgical strike, no quick kill. He landed on the far side of the moon, 3 clicks from the compound. Disconnected from the neural tether. Walked on foot. Wrapped in armor more for pressure than protection. The suit didn't glow, it didn't hiss. It was matte black and silent, like a grave. He moved fast, up the ridgeline, through low-gravity drifts of dust, across frozen craters and slag pits. The wind whipped at his coat. His breath echoed in his helmet. He reached the compound in under 30 minutes. No alarms, no lights. They weren't expecting him. He didn't knock. Inside, Halvan's guards were ex-Imperial, the type who wore their medals on their chest and their cowardice on their breath. When Callan entered the outer corridor, one of them raised a rifle. He didn't finish aiming. Callan crushed his elbow, slammed him into the wall, and dragged him across the floor by his helmet cable. He fired once into the ceiling, just enough to rattle the base. Then he dropped the body. No killing, not yet. Halvan's private quarters were sterile and lavish. Glass walls, heated flooring, air scrubbers designed for Imperial royalty. And there, in the center, sat the man himself. Older now, thinner. But Callan knew the eyes. They were the same ones that blinked on the screen before VX-7 was authorized. They didn't look scared. They looked tired. "Of course it's you," Halvan said softly. Callan didn't speak. "I wondered when you'd show up," Halvan continued, walking slowly to the bar and pouring himself a drink. "Do you want one?" Callan tilted his head. "You poisoned children?" "Yes," Halvan said, voice heavy. "I did." Callan's hand clenched. "You want to hear why?" Halvan asked. "No." "You should. I really shouldn't." Halvin stared at the glass in his hand. They said we had two choices: fire or surrender. The council was split. I chose fire, and then I buried it. He drank. Callan stepped forward. Say her name. Halvin blinked. What? Say her name. I don't know her name. She was 10. Died choking on gas in a tunnel you buried in chemicals. Say her name. I don't know it, Halvin said again, quieter. Callan's fist snapped forward, caught Halvin in the jaw, sent him sprawling across the floor. The drink spilled. The glass cracked. Halvin didn't fight back. He didn't beg. He just said, I was trying to end it. Callan stood over him. You ended nothing. He pulled out a data spike, jammed it into Halvin's terminal, downloaded every file, every order, every lie. Send this, Callan said. To who? The galaxy? Halvin nodded. Then, after a long silence, he looked up and asked, Will this make it stop? Callan stared. Then whispered, I don't know. Back aboard the wreck, hours later, the ship was quiet again. It had tasted rage, but now it tasted grief. Only 2 names remained, and Callan wasn't sure he had enough left inside to finish the list. The stars had never looked colder. They drifted past the wreck's viewing canopy, dim and unreachable. Callan watched them in silence, wrapped in a darkness even the ship didn't touch. His face was thinner, pale, eyes deeper set now. There was something in them that wasn't rage anymore. It was fatigue. 2 names left, but the hunger had gone. The wreck still pulsed beneath his boots, still ready, still synced to him by strands of memory and pain. But the bond had changed. It no longer surged with each new target, no longer whispered to him in the quiet. It was waiting now, for him to decide. The last 2 names were still alive, buried deep inside the Empire's final stronghold, the hidden command world of Terran Kar, locked behind layers of bureaucracy and fleets, a planet scrubbed from charts, the heart of the old war, and Callan's final stop. The ship approached slowly, cloaked in the magnetic wash of a dying star. No fanfare, no signal, no declaration of war. Callan didn't need one. He wasn't here to fight anymore. He was here to remember. Terran Kar looked like every other Imperial world. Cold, silver, controlled. Towers reached into clouds. Drones moved in perfect sync. The people here didn't ask questions. They believed the war had ended decades ago. They lived because others had been erased. The 2 remaining council members lived in luxury, their names hidden under new titles. They advised from the shadows. Their hands weren't stained. They were sterile, clean, sanitized history. But Callan remembered. And now, so did everyone else, because he'd released the files, all of them, to the entire galaxy. From the day he walked out of Halvin's compound, he stopped erasing people and started showing the truth. Raw footage, mission logs, refugee lists, internal orders, hollow recordings of children coughing out their lungs in sterilized tunnels. The reaction was immediate. Protests, desertions, Empire ships turning off their transponders. One of the remaining names, Aran Sol, vanished 3 days later, disappeared into a self-imposed exile. Some said he walked into an unshielded reactor chamber. Others believed he tried to buy passage into another galaxy. Callan didn't follow. He didn't have to. The truth had become the weapon, and it was doing the work for him. He landed on Terran Kar unchallenged. The last name on his list, Commander Ryth Vallis, the man who had personally overseen the orbital bombardment of Earth, was still alive, still protected, still convinced he'd been right. Callan found him in a marble hall built to echo like a cathedral. No guards, no guns, just two men. One standing in silence, the other sitting with a datapad in hand, watching old war footage on loop. Valis looked up as Callan entered. "You're late." Callan said nothing. Valis tossed the datapad aside. "I suppose this is where you do what you came to do." "I didn't come to kill you," Callan said. Valis raised an eyebrow. "Really? I came to show you." He stepped forward, handed him a small data crystal. Valis took it. "What is this?" "Anna," Callan said softly. Valis's face didn't change, but his hands tightened slightly. "She was 10, Callan continued. "She was in Shelter 42. You approved the orbital fire that destroyed it. No targets inside, just civilians, mostly families." "I don't remember her," Valis said after a moment. "That's the point." Callan turned to go. Valis called after him. "This won't fix anything, you know." Callan paused in the doorway. "I'm not here to fix it," he said, "just to make sure no one forgets it again." Callan left Terrankar that same day. The wreck was silent as he climbed aboard, still pulsing, but slower now. Faint, like it was no longer straining to hold shape. Like it, too, was tired. Callan sat in the command cradle one last time. He didn't enter coordinates. He didn't prime the weapons. He just sat, breathing slowly, feeling the weight of it all settle around him like ash. Earth was gone. Anna was gone. But maybe, just maybe, the silence they left behind wouldn't be wasted, because now the Empire remembered. And as long as that memory stayed alive, maybe no one else would have to burn the way he did. He drifted for days after that, through unclaimed space, unseen, untraced, untethered. The wreck hummed quietly, systems winding down, not in defeat, but in peace. Callan closed his eyes, and this time, for the first time in years, he let himself sleep. Epilogue. Years later, rumors still echoed across the stars, of a man who flew a living ship, forged from the bones of Earth's last cry, of council members who vanished, of files that shattered the myth of the Empire's purity, of a little girl's name whispered across rebel transmissions. Anna. Some said the wreck still floated in the void, asleep in a pocket of dark space. Others said it burned itself out the day Callan's war ended. No one knew for sure. But they remembered the message, the one-line broadcast across every known system. I only needed one shot. The rest was for memory. And memory, it turned out, was stronger than any weapon.